Hi there. We're going to spend just a few minutes talking about General Ledger as a module in Analytics for Spire. General Ledger is a module that brings in transaction information and lets you analyze it in a variety of different ways. Like most modules, it has a details and a summary module. So if I start by just getting information, you'll see that what we do by default is bring in information based on your general ledger transactions, so debit, credit, amounts, and so on. And again, this grid is fully searchable, and it basically has access to all the available fields. Let's just simplify this, and we'll pop up the field list, and you'll see that it has pretty much all the information you would tie to general ledger, bank account information. We even bring in employee related information, customer and vendor related information in here as well. Your segments, if you're segmenting in general ledger, they're all job cost numbers and accounts are all part and parcel of these transactions. So basically everything that ties to the general ledger transaction as well as things that relate to it as well. We can even bring in currency rate information, and it's easy to drop that in. And if there's a foreign currency debit or credit amount, we can bring that information in as well, and it's as simple as dragging and dropping. So very powerful, which you can even do in the details grid. I can group by where from and suddenly start looking at transactions that came from accounts payable as opposed to from accounts receivable. GIMP is from import, so again I can zero down on particular transactions and look at aspects of that transaction, whether it's the memo or maybe I want to see any transactions in that range that include the word adjustments. And now I'm looking basically at any adjustments within the time frame that I specified, and I can see the transaction numbers. I can sort. It looks like there's one big transaction for an adjustment here. So again, very, very powerful in terms of what you can do given the access that you have to those. Where it becomes extra powerful is when you get into the summary. And here we've made some significant enhancements over our previous products. What we do here is by default, we ask you to specify whether it's income statement accounts you're interested in, which is generally what people are interested in, or balance sheet accounts. Income statement accounts basically let you build a little on-the-fly P&L. So what happens is when I clicked Get Data, it picked up based on my fiscal period range, and then grouped by type, then group name, and then account name, all the actual accounts, transactions summarized to a balance. So here we have all of our gross sales, followed by our cost of sales, followed by those things that are grouped into different categories for expenses outside of cost of goods sold, each with their subtotals according to each one of those groups, and our operating expenses, and then our other revenues and expenses total, and then an expense total which ties to a gross sales. So we did 3.7 million here. Our expenses were 2.9, and our remaining, or our difference essentially, our profit is 851,000. Let's expand this though. Just click there, and that'll give us our previous fiscal period. And now what we get is a nice comparative, so we can see last year's fiscal numbers versus this year's fiscal numbers, and we can compare that year to year. We automatically provide a percentage breakdown, so this is basically giving you your percentage, what percentage of sales overall difference was there between for sales of cables, coupling, and connectors between 2001 and 2002. Okay, we're up by about 14%. What about sales compact disc players? Well, there we're down actually. Now, one thing to note, especially with regarding things like general ledger, is that may not necessarily be a fair comparison if we're not completed the current fiscal year, and that's the other reason that you would use these. So here I might say, well, let's go till May 31st, because that's where we're completed. And a quick nice little trick, if I click and unclick, it resets that so that I have an equivalent fiscal period compare. Let's get data again. And what we'll see now is our comparisons make a bit more sense. As at May 31st, 2001 compared to where we're at 2002, here are the differences. And we can see that sales by and large have been going up quite a lot. In this particular case, this has went up a huge amount, 282% in sales of computerized games. So from 12,000 to 47,000. Cool thing here, your drill downs work. So if you want to drill down, you can simply just double click and that drills down and shows you, sales of particular item that you double clicked on, and you can see debit and credit amounts, other information that might be relevant to whatever it is that you're digging down on, who you're selling to. You can even add that customer number field. So I could say, go in here and say, show me which customers in particular I'm buying from, and sort by that too. I can even take that a step farther and say, and group it again. And if I'm looking at credit sales, or I can go ahead and say, give me a summation of that as well. So very powerful being able to jump back and forth between the summary grid and the detail grid. A couple of neat things you can do here. I mean, obviously you can graph like you can in other places. So here I could say, maybe I want a pie chart of this year versus last year sales, and that'll show me a pie chart, which if I explode it, I can probably read a little bit better. And here I can see, well, that's actually got a lot of information on it, but I can break that down even further and just focus on particularly high categories if I'd like. One of the other neat things that I can do here is I can also start subdividing down these. So I can say, okay, I'm interested particularly in looking at, let's say, only operating expenses. And now I can just focus specifically on operating expenses. And here it's useful. I can look and say, okay, where are my operating expenses going up or down? One of the nice things about General Ledger is that it's one of the few places where you can get into non-inventory related expenses, which can be a critical part of your business. So here I might look and say, well, I'm comparing equal years, and yet my expenses are up potentially a significant amount. They went from 383 to 421. Where are they up? And I can focus specifically on where they're up. I can see, I didn't spend anything on meals and entertainment, so that's 100%. But on printing and stationery, I spent a lot. Last year I spent $3,000. This year I spent way more than double that. And again, this is where it's useful. I can double click, and this will show me specifically where I was spending the money. It looks like I spent most of that money with these particular two vendors. How's that compared to last year? What did I look at? Printing and stationery. Oh, it looks like I only had one invoice with each one of those vendors. So, what's happened? Why am I spending more? Maybe it's a legitimate reason, but it's something worth drilling down on. So again, I can focus specifically on that. I can do other things too, though. I can say, let's go back to that, and let's focus specifically on a customer. So you might think that's strange. How can you focus on a customer when you're looking at income statement accounts? What's neat is if I choose customers, because they're part of the GL transaction record, I can specifically say, well, let's look at BC Audi, for example. And what you see with BC Audi is now the revenues generated lines versus the cost of sale generated lines, and compare the two and see specifically how much money you made for that particular customer. So here I can say, okay, last year I made $3,200, which is arguably not great. This year I made $27,000 as of May 31st. That's a huge improvement. So I might want to switch to the next customer and say, well, let's not worry about them. Let's look at CanSpeak, for example. And CanSpeak, again, same thing. Things are going really well with them. Let's pick a different customer. Ontario Sound, for example. And we'll see with Ontario Sound, okay, now it's something I probably want to focus on a little bit more. Ontario Sound, last year I did revenue, or actually profit of $28,000, but this year, as of May 31st, only $20,000. So again, I might want to drill down on that. What's changed? Was there big sales that happened last year that haven't happened? Clearly here for speakers, they made a huge purchase, which there's no equivalent purchase of in the current year. The other nice thing about General Ledger is it brings in all expenses. So it brings in things like freight charged, it brings in things like discounts given and taken to a customer. So you really aren't just looking at a cost of goods versus the revenue of the sale that you've made. You're looking at actually pieces that have nothing to do with that, but do directly impact whether you're profitable with that customer. So again, very, very powerful way of looking at income types accounts and expense type accounts, and even comparing them together. One last example I'll give you. Let's show all the customers again, but let's focus specifically on actually, let's use the filter editor for this one. Let's focus where the name of the account contains home theater, and that was a bad example. Let's fix that. Let's say speakers. There we go. And what we're looking at now is a comparative of specifically cost of goods sold for speakers compared to sales of speakers. And here we can see, okay, as of May 31st, year over year, we made $190,000 in the sales of speakers versus $274,000 in the sales of speakers. Maybe that's fantastic. Maybe that's not what you expected. It's really depends very much on the margins that you're getting as you're moving forward. Based on the overall gross sales increase, I would have expected that I was doing potentially even better than this. So again, just a quick way of being able to get access to summary information from GL transactions, which can be extremely valuable.